Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's your man, Russ Mitchell, Homesick Buckeye. I'm back with you again. I've got another episode of Keto Conversations, where I bring you folks from all walks of life who've embraced ketogenic living and seen results. We want to share their stories with you to uplift you, to motivate you, and to get you on that keto road with us or keep you on that keto road with us. Today's guest needs no introduction. He is so well loved, so well respected in the ketogenic world. It is none other than Dave Mack. Welcome, Dave.
Hey Russ, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Man, I'm great. It's an honor and a privilege, man. I've told you this before. I love your energy and your attitude. You're just a kind soul. You just have a good spirit, a good energy. I'm a fan, of course, a subscriber, and everybody else should subscribe as well. And so today we're just going to have a conversation between ketogenic friends and learn more about Dave and his life. So we start out, Dave, the way we always start out with everybody. Tell us where you were born and tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. I was born in Scotland. Um,
Oh, okay.
that's
Yeah.
hence the complexion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
yeah, I grew up in Australia. I've lived in Australia since I
Mhm.
was 6 years old, but
Okay.
the Australian sun could never beat my Scottish genes. So um,
I love that.
so
I
I'm
love
stuck
that.
with this Scottish skin. But
Okay.
yeah, so I lived in Melbourne since I was 6 years old. Grew up in Melbourne, and
Now,
yeah.
what prompted the move from Scotland, where you were born, and then I guess at an early age, you moved. What prompted the move?
So it was kind of I guess around 1980 when the decision would have been made by my parents,
Hmm.
and my my mum especially had you know realized that at that time Scotland wasn't doing very well economically, and it was going through somewhat of a bit of a recession or something, I think.
Mm,
And so she just wanted to give my brother and I a better life, and so that's why
yeah,
we moved to Australia.
gotcha. Economic reasons. So you
Mm.
mentioned a brother. Is any other siblings besides your brother?
No, just my brother. Yeah, so he's 3 years younger than me.
Gotcha, gotcha. And where does he
Yeah,
live?
he lives in Queensland in Australia now.
Oh,
So
okay.
up
So yeah,
north, yeah. He's about as the crow flies from as the crow flies, as the airplanes fly from Japan, it'd probably be about 6 hours away.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love
Mm.
that. All right, so born in Scotland, mom decided, hey, there's better options in Australia, so we're going to up and go to Australia. So now you're in Australia. Tell us a little bit about your childhood there in Australia, and maybe what your diet was like as a child and that sort of thing, and let the folks know what that was like.
Yeah, very good question. So, um, we didn't have a lot of money growing up in Australia, so, you know, I wasn't the kind of kid that grew up with really expensive kind of dinners, that kind of thing. But mum tried her best. We always had like the lamb or the beef, uh, vegetables, that kind of thing. She was doing her best. But I was heavily addicted to sweets,
Okay, now
and
was that even at a young age as a child, or is that something developed middle school, high school?
oh, no, that was elementary school. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Um,
So you kid with the candy all you had the
yeah.
candy all the time. You couldn't wait for Halloween, buddy. Halloween was did they celebrate Halloween in
Not so much at that time, but, yeah, I mean, for me at that time, it was Halloween every day, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so,
I love now
and
question for you. Just quick question, just to
sure.
interject just quickly. The diet in Australia at that time, and I know you were only 6, or so years old, but maybe you know the answer. The diet in Australia at that time, was that the same as the American diet, or was it different? What was the culture, and everything like, there in that part of the world?
Okay. This might be a controversial thing to say, but I would
Right.
I'm going to say that my feeling is that America is about 10 or 15 years ahead of
Mm,
the good and the bad habits that tend to happen in Australia. I think so. Diet wise, we were
interesting.
probably about 10 or 15 years behind.
So
So
basically, America kinda sets a trend you think that Australians follow in many
Oh,
ways.
definitely, and I'm not sure if
Mm,
that's, through movies or something like that,
right.
but, it does seem that whatever's happening in America now, that will be what's happening in America 15 years' time, you know?
Gotcha. So in the '80s, then back then, it was, um,
Be like
it
mid-90s in the
that's
U sorry, other way around. It'd be like, 60s or something in America, I guess,
Gotcha. So
food-wise.
at that time, you guys in the '80s, then probably you didn't have the full standard American diet then. You were probably still eating a lot of butter and high fat kind of things because that's kind of what it was like in the '60s. I was born in
Yeah.
'69, but the low fat and the high carb and the lean meats and all that stuff. When I was a kid, that really wasn't it. That didn't come till later. So it sounds like when you
Mm.
were a kid, there was still a lot of butter and, like you said, lamb and beef and all that stuff was,
Yeah,
uh,
and I mean that kind of the margarine and the low fat, it was starting to come, it was starting to be bigger, but I guess that it became more of a thing in the 90s, I think, or the late 80s.
gotcha. Now, did your mom have a sweet tooth? Did you get that from her, or did you inherit that, or where do you think that came from?
Actually, I'm not sure. No, I don't think my neither my mother nor my father have got a sweet tooth, so I don't know where I got it from.
Sometimes these things skip a generation, so maybe you had a
Yeah, yeah.
a grandma or grandpa that was all about that. All right, so not so you're 6, 7, 8 years old. You're in middle school. You really got that sweet tooth going, sweet tooth working. It's Halloween every day. You're killing the candy. Did you develop a weight problem at that age, or were you active enough and such that you kind of overcame it with youth?
So so I was never active. I've never been active.
Hmm,
I've always disliked active things.
gotcha,
Um,
gotcha.
but, I I was never big
Mhm.
except for my stomach. Like, I
Mm.
was like one of these the guy that's, he's thin, but he's an alcoholic or he's a sugar addict or a bread addict or something, and so he's got a pot belly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
kind of
that's
paraphrase.
what I was like. I always felt like I had this belly that I couldn't do anything with, I felt like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like a garden gnome or something. I'm not sure, like
I got you. I got you.
Mm,
So you're in middle school and you're kind of a chubby kid around the middle, that kind of stuff through
mm.
middle school and high school. So you didn't play sports and you weren't athletic and stuff. What kind of things did you like as a high school kid? Were you in the chess club or the band or anything? What did you like?
No, so, when I was in the 4th grade in elementary school, um, my teacher brought a computer in from home. She owned an Apple IIe or an Apple IIc, I can't remember
Yes,
which,
yes, yes, yes.
and, she brought that in for us to muck around with, and we'd never seen a computer before, and it was like, "Wow,
Right,
look at
right.
this thing." Um,
Yeah.
and, so I'd always been kinda academic, right? And I could get through my work in class very quickly, and so I would, try and finish my work really, really quickly so I could say, "Hey, teacher, can I get on the computer?"
Oh,
And,
okay.
so I'd finish work and get onto the computer, and then I liked pushing buttons and, playing a game or something didn't allow you to push all the buttons on the keyboard, you can only press, like, the space bar and the arrow keys or something if you're playing a game. So, I taught myself how to program,
Oh, okay.
and, I started with Logo and moving the turtle around the screen, and then I moved on to
Yep,
Basic and stuff like that, and
yeah.
I loved it because it helped me learn how to type, which made me kind of special as far as like everyone else in the class, because in 1984, no one like kids couldn't type, right?
Right,
And
right.
so I'm like "Drrrr" on the keyboard, and they're like, "That's amazing! This is,"
Yeah.
And so I grew up with this love of programming, and so
Mm.
yeah, that was my interest.
I love that. I have the similar interest. I got my first computer in 1978, I believe. I was about
Mm,
8 or 9 years old, and it was a Franklin Ace 1000, which
wow.
was compatible to Apple computer. It was a knockoff. It was like a knockoff of Apple because at that time Apple owned the market. I mean, it was in all the schools. The PC wasn't a thing
Mm,
until much later. So I had the Franklin Ace 1000. My mom got it for us, and I know exactly what you mean. We had the orange screen. I think it was an orange screen, and I just love that thing. And then the rest went from there. But that's very, very interesting. I share that with you.
mm,
So going into high school, there that was because you said that was around fourth or fifth grade. So
mm.
going into high school, did you continue those computer aspirations and that kind of thing? Was that kind of where you were headed and what you were into when you got in high school?
Yeah.
And
So
gotcha.
I think the love for computers and programming kind of I like the I could make things, and I'd never been interested in making things or doing anything before, but I could make the computer do things for me,
Yeah.
and so I really enjoyed that. And yeah, also back then, again, no one could do this, right? So it was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you're this amazing. Everyone looked at me with this kind of, oh wow, you can actually operate these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Mm,
know exactly what you mean. I went to boarding school in high school, 4 years of boarding school, and there were probably about 100 guys in the dorm, and there were only this was 1984 or 85, like there were only 2 kids, me and one other young man had a computer in our room. I
mm,
went to college my first year in 1987, and there were
wow,
only in a dorm of 200 guys, there were only 3 of us that had computers in our room in 1987. It's crazy when you
wow.
think about that now. And yes, I was so far ahead of the curve. I understood, the concepts, and back in those days, when you wanted to do something on a computer, you had to go down to the computer lab,
Mm,
at the school, whether it was a high school or a college, you didn't have a computer in your room. Some people later on had word processors, like these little basically electric typewriters, so they could type their papers and stuff. But you had to go down to the computer lab. Sometimes you had to make an appointment and wait. And hundreds of students would be in there trying to do their work on this bank of computers. And I had one in my room, and people were just amazed by that I had a computer in my room. Now, if you went to colleges, if somebody didn't have a computer in their room, you'd probably be amazed. They have
mm,
laptops and all these different devices. So
right.
that's very interesting. So anyway, so you get out of high school, you get into college age. Did you go to college or did you go into tell us about maybe your early 20s and what life was like then?
Okay, so basically, late high school, everything kind of changed for me. So Um, I had always been I'd been a straight A student all the way through school, and except for sport or PE, didn't do
Yeah,
well
right.
there. Um, so I got to my last year of high school, and I was like, something changed, and I just like I'd been good at like math had been my favorite subject all through school, and I just fell off a cliff. I don't know what happened,
Hmm.
and
Girls,
so
Dave, were you chasing those girls maybe, Dave, a little bit? Were you?
maybe it might have been. It was a lot of distractions, probably. Like I was working part time at McDonald's and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And but I just lost interest, and suddenly everything was harder, and so I like 3 months, I guess, into the last year of high school, I found a full-time job and I quit school.
Gotcha, gotcha,
Um,
gotcha. So you
and
did high school. Mhm.
so yeah,
Mhm.
so the IT that I've been doing since the fourth grade paid off because I found an IT
Right.
assistance job, you know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah, so I left high school and I went to do this full time job, and yeah, it was great, and um, yeah, things have work wise, things just kind of I guess because I had the experience that other people wouldn't have
Mhm.
had at that age,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
each job I had gave me more experience than I otherwise would at that age,
Mhm.
and then so that always helped me to get a better job in the future with different companies. So it just all kind of
I know
worked out.
exactly what you I know exactly what you mean because in the IT world, I mean, I was in that world for many years before I got to what I'm doing now, but what you could do was more important than credentials that you had. So you could be 19 years old if you knew how to program in at that time it was Fortran and COBOL and BASIC and assembler. I mean, this is in the 70s and 80s. If you knew how to do that stuff, they didn't care whether you went to college or
Mm.
any of that kind of stuff. It was all about what can you do?
Hmm.
Okay. If you can do it, get to work and you can make good money. And I had the same issue, in my professional life. I dropped in and out of college, ended up with 3 years of college done, never finished because I was just making so much money working. I'm like, what am I doing here? Sitting here in these classes when I could be out doing freelance work or doing other things, making money. So I
Mm.
understand. So you're in your 20s and you're working in the IT field. Is that, accurate, you would
Yeah.
say? And where were you health-wise then? Were you gaining weight? Were you kinda maintaining weight? Were you still eating a lot of sugar and stuff like that? Where were you there, with your diet?
Yeah, I mean, the sugar never stopped. I mean, health-wise, I wasn't so overweight. Again, it was really it was the
So
belly, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But to take a step back, before I got to my 20s, so when I was 17, not long after I'd started working full time, I had a stroke, and
Oh, wow. Yeah.
so
That's deep.
that kind of changed that kind of changed
Mm,
the direction I was going in a little bit, but yeah,
gotcha.
so
Let's talk
mm,
about that a little bit. Where were you? What were you doing? How did it happen?
so this is 1992,
Yeah.
and it was a Sunday night, just regular Sunday night. I went to bed early because I was getting ready to go to work the next day, and nothing out of the ordinary. Woke up the next morning and everything was different. I felt like I had a some kind of virus or something. It felt like um, I had a bit of a weight lying on me because it was hard to move, hard to get up, and I'd an aneurysm had burst in my head while I was asleep, and the subsequent blood coming out of that break was what caused the stroke. I was
Mm,
very lucky. My blood's unusually thick, so it clotted very quickly, and that saved my life. And that's why I was able to wake up. But
mm.
I went about my day as normal. I got ready. I thought I've got this virus. It kind of felt a little bit like a bad hangover.
Oh.
Unfortunately, at 17 years old, I knew what that was already.
Yeah.
And I
I love that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I was like, "Oh, got some kind of virus. Oh, well." I mean, I just soldier on, you know? And I feel like
So you had a stroke, but you didn't have any motor function damage,
oh,
anything? You just
it was, like, my
oh,
right-hand side, like, I felt like there was something heavy on me, and I later realized that there's something wrong with my right side. I couldn't raise my
right.
arm as easily, that kind of thing. Um and but I just soldiered on,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
and I went to like I lived in a granny flat at the back of my parents' place at the time, like a detached little unit. And so I went into their house that morning and I saw my mum, and um I didn't stay in there for long, and I think she felt like there's something wrong, but she probably thought I'd been drinking or something, you know?
Right.
Um, and so I went off to work, but as I started I had to walk to the train station, travel an hour to work, and, then walk a bit to get to the office, and by the time I got to the office, like, it had just got so much worse.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was, like, dragging my body behind me, you know, kinda thing, with the right side of my body behind me, you know? Um, and, like, literally, I'd take one step forward with my left leg, and then, you know, my right foot is on its side being dragged back to, you know, back to where the left foot
yeah,
is, and
yeah,
then I take another step with my left foot. So,
yeah.
I decided at that point, "Okay, well, I think something's probably
Right,
seriously
yeah.
wrong. I better go home."
And
And
so you
yeah,
hopped back on the train and went back home.
yeah. And then the
So
first
what
doctor I saw told me I
yeah,
had gastroenteritis.
that's what I was gonna say is at what that was my next question is at what point did we get to a doctor and find out that you had in fact had a stroke? And how long was
S
that period of time?
So, yeah, I went straight to the doctor, and he did a full examination and concluded that I had gastric issues, and he told me to go and rest and come back if things got worse. And, you know, this is why this side of my face is kinda not working, it's like this. And, so apparently that signifies gastric issues. And I guess if all the gastric issues are to one side, then, you know, it might be like
Yeah.
that. But, so later that night, I couldn't even cut my dinner. And so my mum bundled me back in the car and took me to another doctor. And as soon as that doctor looked at me, and I always get emotional at this moment, I don't know why.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, he just looked at me and he went, "There's something wrong with his head. Get him to the hospital now." And he
yeah,
said, "We haven't got time to wait for an ambulance. Just run every red light you can and get him to the hospital." And I don't know
yeah.
what it is about that moment, but every time I talk about that moment, I get upset, and
Well,
it's really
because your life was on the line, you know? And
mm,
I talk about this a lot. Let me tell you something, man. You know, I talk about this all the time. It's just in the context of ketogenic life, but it's throughout life, man. If you aren't emotional about things and passionate about things, man, you ain't suffered enough. When you've suffered and when you've gone through something traumatic or something painful or something difficult, especially when you come out of it, man, you got joy and you're going to be passionate. You're going to be emotional. I mean, so yeah, if you can't get excited about this thing, or if you don't shed those, man, you haven't suffered enough. You haven't been through enough. But people who've been through things and suffered through things, they know. So
mm.
I understand. You know, I understand. I mean, you're thinking about a time, man, when your life was on the line, and thank goodness for that doctor. You know, I'm thankful for that doctor. I'm thankful for your mother sensing that importance of rushing you there because maybe I wouldn't be talking to you today if it hadn't have been for that. So sure, you better believe that's emotional. Absolutely, that's emotional. All right, so you got diagnosed with the stroke, and I'm sure there was a path of rehabilitation and all that kind of stuff. How long did that take until you came out on the other side of the stroke, you know, kind of back to life and back to your normal reality?
Um, it was probably, I guess, from when it happened to when everything was resolved, it was probably 6 to 8 months because,
Okay.
the first operation, they were unable to fix the problem, so I had to go for a different operation, but, yeah, just and the intervening time and stuff, like but after about 8 months, everything was resolved.
So you were back drinking again, and 8 months later, you were back.
And much to my mother's dismay, back smoking again.
Oh, gotcha. When did
Yeah,
you start the smoking habit?
15 years old.
Wow. Wow, you were out in them streets, man. You was in them Australian
Right?
streets, man. You was a wild child. Boy, I could only imagine the Dave Mack out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're 18, 19 years old. You've come through the stroke, and you're kind of back on track. Did you go back to IT? Did you have to relearn things and that, or did you retain? Because a lot of times when you have those strokes and stuff, it's funny the things you remember, the things you forget, and all that. So tell
Mm.
us about those few years after you 18, maybe to 21.
So I think when I like the doctor told me that the weakening was always there in the blood vessel and or the artery, and that's it just got to the point that it was too weak and it burst, right? And so I feel like I'm lucky that I was 17 when it happened and not
Yeah,
35 or
yeah,
45,
yeah.
because I made apart from the weakness, I made an instant recovery. I was back working
Mhm.
very quickly.
Awesome.
And yeah, everything kind of returned to normal. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. All right, so
Mm.
let's fast forward maybe to the mid-20s, early 30s. Where are you at now? What are you doing, and what's your life looking like in your mid-30s?
Mid 30s. So mid 30s, I guess, where was I? I was in Japan by my mid 30s.
Okay, now when
So,
did you move from Australia? Because that's where you're at now,
yes. Yeah.
Japan, and you've been there for off and on, or have you been there steadily since you got
Steadily
there?
17 years. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. So when did you leave to go to Japan from Australia, and what brought that on?
So I would have been 31. So I'd been I'd been very lucky. Like after the stroke happened, I got a job where I was traveling,
Mhm,
and it took me to like the US, the UK, Hong Kong, everywhere, and
hmm, didn't
I
know that.
really enjoyed that. And when that job finished, and I was back in Australia, I'd lived in Australia for quite a few years, and I was getting really bored. And I was like,
Mhm.
had itchy feet, like, oh, that traveling, I got a bit tired of it, but it was really
Yeah.
good. Everything was different all the time.
They say if you had
And
itchy feet, they got itchy feet, they got a spray for that, Dave, you can fix that.
so, yeah.
I got you, man. So you were
So,
born in Australia, you wanted to just something different,
something
you'd been
different.
around the
And
world and you wanted
what's
to
more
go somewhere
different
else
than
and have fun.
Japan?
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm.
Now, so you went to Japan for work. Now, was it a new kinda job or this kinda the same job you've been doing or, uh
So I had originally planned to just quit my job, go to Japan, and then see what happened. And
mm,
when I quit my job, I was working for a bank at the time. And when I quit my job, they said, "Oh, but we've got this big project coming up." And because they knew I was going to Japan, and they said, "So if you're going out there, you don't have a job lined up, why don't you keep working for us and help us with this project?" And so back in, when was this? 2006, I was remote working before remote working was kind of a big thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, for the first 5 years I worked in Japan, it was working for my the bank I worked for in Melbourne from my bedroom, basically.
Gotcha. So in Australia, you're in your, late 20s or whatever. Is your diet still the same? Still a lot of sugar? Still got the belly? Were you gaining
Yep.
weight at the time? I mean, just where were you at right
Yeah,
before you went to
I was starting to yeah, I was when I was about, I guess, late 20s, I was putting on a lot of weight. I mean,
Mm,
and that was actually probably the heaviest I've ever been, around when I was
mm,
around 29 or 30, and that would
mhm.
have been, let me do a quick conversion. I would have been at that time, um, around 200 pounds,
Gotcha. And how tall are you?
and 5'8".
Gotcha. Okay. I'm with you.
So
So go ahead.
it
Go
w
ahead.
and it was in my face a lot at that point.
Mm, mhm.
Mhm.
So you go to Japan. Was there a diet change, or were you eating the same kind of diet when you got there? And then also talk about the culture, the language, and the things that you had to change when you got to Japan.
So yeah, I did lose weight after I got to Japan, but that was, not because I was eating Japanese food. That's because I just got tired of my weight, and I went low carb at the time and lost weight. Um,
Okay, well, let me interject quickly. So, where did you hear about low carb and ketogenic kind of living? I guess we'll
uh-huh,
we'll bump that in there maybe before, since it sounds like you found out
sure.
about that before you got to Japan.
Yeah. So actually I found out about that in 2000.
Okay.
So I heard about the Atkins diet in 2000, and there was a lot of negative press about it at the time, and
Yes.
that's what alerted me to it. So I'm like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
this sounds like something I wanna give a try to."
Yeah,
And,
well, you were Wild Dave. You were Wild Dave back then. Yeah, so I got you. I got you.
and it worked, but like, there was so much negativity around it, and
Yeah.
my
Yes.
colleagues also kind of were very negative about it, and so
Gotcha.
after a few months, I just gave it away.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
throughout the last 20 years, 23 years, I've kind of gone, "I know I can lose weight on this." So when I've got to the point
Right,
where I
right.
feel frustrated and know I need to lose weight, that's what I've done.
Gotcha.
Mm,
You were doing it before you even went to Japan,
mm,
but you didn't look at it as a lifestyle. You just
that's
looked at
right.
it as a weight loss thing, and it's like, "When I
Mm,
wanna lose some weight, I can do this, but I can't live like this." I got it, 'cause I went through the same thing. So now you're in Japan. Tell us about the change of life, the culture, the language, the diet, just kinda what
yeah.
was going into that.
So, like, Japan culturally is completely different. Like, everything is different here, so it takes a lot of getting used to. But that's food culture, that's TV, that's, the way they communicate. Everything's everything's completely different. Um
Right?
So you'll notice that when I'm talking to people, I'll often like I nod my head a lot, and part of that is me going, "Yeah, I get it, I understand," and the other part is actually a cultural thing with Japan because, like in Japan, that's what people do all the time.
Right,
They don't
yeah.
they don't interject with like, oh yeah, I know," and all this kind of thing, right? They'll just be like
Yeah.
the whole
Huh.
time. Occasionally, they'll make a sound, but they never kinda jump in with the, like, back channeling.
Mhm,
And so that's something a habit I picked up here, but yeah,
mhm.
everything's different.
Did you like the differences, or were they struggles for you, like the food and the
Struggles,
culture?
struggles.
Oh,
The
okay.
the
You
biggest
didn't
the
fit
biggest
right in and
struggle.
fall right in.
Sorry?
So you didn't fit right in and just fall right in at first. You had to
No.
kinda get. Yeah.
No, I mean,
Uh-huh.
17 years on, I still struggle. I mean, the
Really?
biggest the biggest struggle for me is, um communication differences, not language differences, communication differences. So, um, when a Japanese person talks, right? Like Japanese is a high context language. English
Mhm,
is a low context language, right? So when we talk in English, we give each other lots of detail and we repeat that detail over and over in sentence to sentence. And
mhm,
um, it seems repetitive, but we're kind of confirming information and making things very, very clear, right? And one of the reasons we do that is um, English, communication wise, the responsibility for getting the message across lies on the speaker,
mhm,
right? The listener doesn't have any responsibility except listening, right?
mhm,
Um, and maybe confirming that they understand. Whereas in Japan, it's flipped. So the responsibility for the message getting across falls on the listener to understand the
Oh,
context of what's being said.
I
So
see.
the speaker actually gives quite vague and abstract information, and it's up to the listener to understand what context we're talking about, and then try
Okay.
and put all the pieces together and work out what's going on.
Or to ask questions to get more information.
Asking questions is not it's frowned upon.
Oh, okay.
Like, especially in business, like, and this is why you often get the situations where, like, a boss will ask an employee to do something, and 2 hours later, the employee still hasn't done anything because the employee doesn't actually know what to do. But
Wow.
they can't, um, offend the boss by going in and saying, "Boss, I want you to clarify what you wanted me to do."
Oh.
Right, and
Wow,
this is
that
one of
seems
the
like a
reasons
very
that I
efficient.
irritate my boss so much because, like, when she asks me to do something, I wanna pin her down and say, "Hang on, you
Yeah,
told me this the other day, and when I did it, like,
yeah.
you said it's the wrong thing to do, so give me specific instructions about what you want me to do with this." And she
Wow.
doesn't like that.
That's very interesting. It seems like
Yeah.
a very inefficient way to communicate. It seems like there's a lot of time and energy and productivity lost because of just communication confusion. I mean, that's
So it works 2 ways, right? It works both ways. So, yes, there is a lot of miscommunication. A lot of decisions don't happen as quickly or as effectively as they should. But, in an environment where, like, let's say a company like Toyota, where all the processes are all set in place, and it's basically, employees are really just there to, be part of a cog in a machine kind of thing, right? In those situations, when people aren't, like, questioning things and aren't throwing, saying, "Hang on, this is the wrong way to do things, this is the wrong approach," it's very effective because it gets the job done very quickly and efficiently.
mm,
And
mm,
that's kind of what I think one of the reasons that this system still exists is it worked very effectively following the war. When it was recovery time and it was just all hands on deck and we have to get things going again, right? But things haven't changed since then. So in the
mm,
industries that are similar to what would have come out of the war, it works really well. But for
mm.
2023 businesses, it's not so effective.
That's interesting. Wow, I learned a lot about the Japanese culture today. Well,
Yeah.
tell us back to ketogenic things. When did you decide to make ketogenic living a lifestyle change, and what led you to that change?
Yeah. So June last year, I saw my doctor and he said, you pre-diabetic and there's an alcohol problem. And
Mm.
spoiler alert, I knew there was an alcohol problem.
Right, right, right. And
And
were you still eating a lot of sugar and stuff? Is that stuff easy to get in Japan? Are you were you still
oh
at that?
yeah,
Okay, that's
way too easy to get.
okay.
And I had irregular work hours, and because of those irregular work hours, I was eating bad stuff at bad times. And
Mm,
like, I was eating ice cream and potato chips and drinking beer and stuff while I was traveling home from work at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Um, so which was probably exacerbating the situation. So anyway, I knew that I had a problem with the food, and I knew I had a problem with alcohol. But hearing the doctor say
that was
it,
beer your drink of choice?
yeah,
Mhm. Okay.
yeah. I wasn't. I've never been. I enjoy, like, I don't know, spirits occasionally, but I've never been big into that. Yeah,
Yeah,
wine or beer
beer
is
beer
really.
was your gotcha, gotcha.
Um,
Alright.
and yeah, I knew I had a problem. on both fronts. But hearing it from the doctor and also realizing that, if I waited much longer, next year the news was going to be worse and it was just going to get progressively worse and worse and worse. And so I had to do something. And the thing that really shocked me is he wanted me to take a drug to stop the
Yeah.
alcohol.
Mm,
And the drug sounded very scary. And I've just never I've never felt good taking drugs. Like, I always feel like it's not really doing what it's intended to do. And so I didn't want any part of that. So that spurred me into action. And I knew on low carb or keto, I had more self control. So I said to him, look, give me a couple of weeks. Let me try and do this for myself. And then let's talk. And so I just like then I just, okay, I'm keto now. And I need that self control. So I'm keto now, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to just stay off the crappy food and stay off the alcohol.
right. So you stopped alcohol and you went keto. Now, is that, these terms, as you well know, we've talked about this before. I'm more of a carb number kind of guy than a term or classification kind of guy because it just means so many things to so many people. When I'm in the family, I talk keto, ketovore, that. So, what was when you first decided I want to change my lifestyle? What was your carb number initially, would you say, when you started?
Well, yeah,
Roughly.
when I switched over, or before I switched over.
Yes. Yeah, after you talked to your doctor and you said, he said told you about your problems and you said, "You know what? I need to go back to, a ketogenic kind of diet." I'm guessing you started in it at the keto level. It sounds like that's what you said.
Yeah,
And so what would you say your carb number was when you first
at that
made
point,
the decision? Mhm.
10 to 20. Yeah,
Okay. All right.
and it was only vegetables,
Okay.
nothing else.
Okay. Okay. So you had to kick sugar then too. I mean,
Mm.
as well as the alcohol because you talked about, having the sugar problem. So you came in. I guess that would be kind of ketovore then, technically by the
Yeah.
the language there. So and that's right. Now, how long did you stay at that 20 number? Because I know your number is a lot lower now. It's
Yeah,
probably zero.
it's 0, right? Yeah,
Right. Right. Right.
so
So how long did it
I
take you to go from 20 to zero?
so a few weeks. Um,
Oh, wow.
so and the reason was I was having real gastric problems this time.
Mm,
So not the imaginary stroke-like gastric symptoms.
right, right, right.
So I I just found myself in the bathroom very quickly after
Mm,
eating breakfast. That because that's when I was having the vegetables, and
mm,
I felt this is it just seems to be going through me too quick. There's something wrong with this.
right.
And so I was searching on YouTube, like trying to work out what was going on and stuff. And I think it was Ken Berry's video that caught my eye first, where he was talking about
Mm,
vegetables, and he was just saying, some vegetables are going to, give you gastric problems and stuff. And some of the ones he mentioned were the ones I was eating.
mm,
And so nightshade vegetables, and I was eating nightshades because I was thinking I need my vitamin C from these
right.
particular vegetables. So, um, yeah, so I just decided, okay, I'm going to try giving it up and see what happens. And I stopped, and it went really well. And yeah, I've been carnivore since.
Wow, I love that, I love that. So you went from kinda keto to carnivore or from a carb number of around 20 to 0 in the span of just a few weeks.
Mhm.
And tell us all what kind of, changes, and what kind of benefits you've seen, since you started up until now.
Um, so the biggest thing I've noticed, um, has been the fact I don't have arthritis anymore. I
Mm,
had pretty bad arthritis in my left knee, and walking was just so difficult, and it was like this bone on bone kind of feeling,
yeah,
and going upstairs, I would have to kind of go on the side and walk up the stairs on the side because then I wouldn't bend my knee as much and hold the handrail so that there was no jerky movements that would give me
yeah,
pain and whatever. Standing on the train, if they, when the train's changing tracks, the train kind of wobbles like that. If that happened, it was just all over for me if I was standing up. And that's just gone. It is just completely gone. Now I can run up and down the stairs. I can jump down the stairs. I can,
I love
it,
that.
yeah. So that's
Now, how
one
long
of,
did it take? How long did it take for that to happen?
I think it's it's hard to put an exact time on it because most of the changes that happen on on carnivore have been so gradual that you just kind of suddenly go one day, "Oh, that thing's not happening anymore. When did
Yeah,
that stop happening?" And then you can't really remember back, but I would say
right.
I was probably about 2 or 3 months in,
Mm,
and when that stopped. Um,
yeah.
and
So
it didn't stop completely, like, there was still a feeling of pain when I was going up the stairs, but that gradually dissipated over time to now there's nothing.
yeah, so your weight wasn't really, it sounds like, the impetus for the change. It was more the pre-diabetic diagnosis and the alcohol
Mm.
problems that really pushed you to change your life.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm happy that I lost weight. I lost 32 pounds. I'm happy that I lost weight, but
Yeah.
that wasn't the reason I did. The reason I did was just I didn't want to be going back to a doctor in a year's time and hear from
Yeah.
the doctor,
Yeah.
"It's bad now."
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm sure the weight loss aided with the uh the arthritis as well. Less weight, less pressure,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff as well.
Mm.
So tell the folks what I mean, if your carb number is 0, this is a pretty obvious question, but we'll just ask it anyway because folks love to know what a typical day is like for you eating wise.
Very good question. So, for the first so basically from around that kind of that Ken Berry video time when I just went on to carnivore, from around then to about a month and a half ago, I was eating um 10 eggs a day and about a pound of beef. And that was only breakfast. I was only doing one meal a day, only breakfast.
Okay. Okay.
And in the last month and a half, my diet's changed a little bit, and that was because of a couple of reasons. I'm starting to feel hungrier in the evening,
Hmm.
and I was feeling more kind of tired when I was waking up in the morning.
Right.
And so now I'm still doing the breakfast, but I'm also having another pound of beef and maybe 6 eggs in the evening. So in a day, I eat 16 eggs and 2 pounds of beef, ground beef.
Wow. Wow. And that's a typical day. Now, do you have any other variations from time to time, or that's just you're just rocking with the ground beef and eggs?
I don't have any variations except like if we go out for dinner on the weekend, and that would be dinner where we go to a yakiniku restaurant, like a Korean barbecue style restaurant or something like that. And in that case, the evening meal is just going to be, that grilled beef that I have there.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. No, and what's your eggs? How do you like them? How do you like
Scrambled,
them?
scrambled.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not too different from I eat a pretty good amount of ground beef and then steaks and briskets, but I do rotate in lamb and salmon and little bits of chicken and seafood, not very often.
Mm.
Ground beef, beef, and lamb and salmon is a steady rotation. And then I get eggs all different kind of ways. I like them scrambled. I make an egg salad. I get boiled eggs, omelets. Just different ways to get the eggs. I don't need a ton of variation, but I need a little bit.
Mm.
By the time if I'm looking at steak the third day, I'm ready to choke somebody, Dave. It's like I gotta I gotta get something else going. God bless those folks that can eat the same thing in perpetuity. Yeah,
Mm.
I struggle with that, at least at this point in my on my path. Maybe that'll change over time, but yeah, I was just telling somebody the other day, like bacon right now, I'm tired of bacon. I've eaten a lot of bacon over the last several months, and I was eating some the other day, and I looked at it. I said, "No, I gotta, change this up because I know myself, and psychologically, I got to stay in the game. If I'm tired of eating something or tired of doing something, it's just a matter of time before I snap and go do something else.
Mm.
And that something else may find me face down in the mashed potatoes at Golden Corral. Okay, so you so I got to keep myself psychologically in it. And when I get frustrated or disgusted or tired, I gotta get something else. That's why I
Mm.
haven't been able to get my carb number to zero.
Mm.
15 it's about the lowest I've been able to do consistently. I mean, I may be zero for a day or two, but like I said, by day three, I'm going to hurt somebody if I don't get some salsa or some guacamole or something.
Yeah, I feel like there's kind of personality things in here, right? Like I
Sure.
feel like you're probably personality wise, you're probably better at moderation than me. Like I'm an all or nothing
Sure.
kind of guy. So
Yes.
as is evidenced by the pack a day smoking habit and the alcoholism and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I if I if I was to have a donut now, it's only a matter of minutes before I'm lying in bed covered in donuts, like it's just
Yeah.
there's no just one for me,
That's interesting though, because I've talked about this with other people. The mentality of the band-aid rippers, I call them the cold turkey people, they seem to be all or nothing people.
Mm,
And everybody that I've talked to that says exactly the same thing you're saying is, man, I could never. They're all band-aid rippers. They're all
yeah,
cold turkey people. I'm the other way. I'm the
yeah,
hot turkey guy. I'm the band-aid.
yeah.
I'm that
Yeah.
guy. And so I can, man, I had a tumultuous, first week. I mean, this of the month, the Saturday, the last weekend, I talked about it on my channel. I was, it was Carbageddon, but the last 4 days, I actually has been carnivore.
Mm.
I haven't had, well, trying to think, I might have had a little bit of cream cheese, but it's been less than 10. My number's
Mm.
been less than 10 the last 4 days. I'm right back on the program. And it's not difficult for me because that's my normal. And my normal is like a gravitational pull. Even when I'm eating that cookie or that pizza, I'm thinking about steak for dinner. I'm thinking about
Mm.
bacon and eggs the next morning because that's my normal. That's the gravitational force that's always pulling me back to my routine. So that's very interesting. The psychological differences there. So
Mm.
we're going to wrap this thing up, Dave. It's been just a wonderful having a chance to talk with you and have a conversation with you. You have just such an interesting and amazing story and an interesting life. And why don't you just wrap up with giving the viewers maybe a word of encouragement, and
Mm.
also where they can find you, all your social media, and where they can find you if they want to to hear more from you.
Sure. So I would say, as far as words of encouragement concerned, I would say if you are in a position where you know that you need to make a change, whether it's because of weight or diabetes or something like that, whatever it is, um, keto ketovore, carnivore, whatever you decide to do, just give it a try. Um, and just do it as close follow it as closely as you can. If you make a mistake or you cheat or whatever, doesn't matter. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just get back on the wagon. Um, because the more you beat yourself up about it, the less likely it is you will get back on the wagon. But just stick to it as closely as you can for 90 days. And if you can do it for 90 days, you are going to experience so many changes that you won't want to go back. And yeah, that's my words of encouragement or words of advice. And if you want to check out my channel or reach out to me, just go to YouTube and type in No Carb Life, or my handle on YouTube is at Zero Carb. So thank you very much for having me on, Russ. I really appreciate it.
Oh, listen, the pleasure and the honor was all mine. And I couldn't have said it better myself. Dave and I see 100% eye to eye on that philosophy and that mentality. And again, I couldn't have said it better. Folks, I want to thank you for watching this edition of Keto Conversations with my friend Dave Mack. You know, I say it all the time, we are so much more than what we eat. We're more than our sicknesses. We're more than our illnesses. We are people. We're brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and just ordinary folks who are looking to find better health and better life. And we want to bring you these stories and show you these folks in hopes to inspire and motivate you. Stay tuned. We'll have more editions of Keto Conversations in up and coming. And as always, we wish you all the best, and we'll see you on the next one.